Hello, and welcome to the second attempt at this video. I am here. I've just eaten some crisps, so they're probably in my teeth. But I am in Canada. I have arrived, and I've been here for about 2 weeks now. You missed some of it because I kind of recorded this whole video and you were kind of looking at my tits the entire time because I didn't frame it correctly. So, going to be a different type of wrap up because I'm not going to go through individual stats and stuff. We're just going to talk about the books because honestly, I can't be bothered to explain it again because I already did. Let me know what you read in the month of June, as we're now quite a bit into July, but things happen. If there is anything you would recommend me or steer me away from, let me know because I'm very much interested in broadening my horizons. And as a result, we are surrounded by the promised land of books. A lot of series and a lot of books here that I have wanted to read for a long time and either have left here with Grace previously or a lot that she has purchased and I have not then got as a result because there's no point having two copies. I'm very excited for where everything can go, but for now we're going to look at June. June was a crazy month. Of course, it was me getting ready, a lot of travelling, preparing to leave the UK, and as a result, it feels like a lifetime ago since I read the first book, and the first book was The Path of Daggers by Robert Jordan, book 8, technically the ninth book I've read because I read New Spring, ninth book in the Wheel of Time that I've read. So, what do I think of this? I thought it was pretty damn good, honestly. I gave it 3.75 stars. Bearing in mind that I think I gave A Crown of Swords like a 3.25, 3, because that book had a Perrin introduction, lame. It had, by that I don't mean Perrin, I mean that it's like 200 pages of him just explaining what's happening in the world and how Rand's feeling and stuff, and it's always the most boring introduction to a Wheel of Time book in my opinion. It had the heaviest concentration of men are from Earth and men are from Mars and women are from Venus vibes. Like it was just relentless in that bullshit. So I didn't give a shit about that book. So this one was a good deal better, in my opinion. The opening was iconic. It's something we've been looking towards for the last few books, honestly, and it was a great scene. I'm not going to spoil what it was, of course, but for those who know about the beginning of book 8, it was a banger of an opening. I was so invested immediately. I mean, maybe this just fits with my liking Fires of Heaven more than Shadow Rising. I like Path of Daggers more than A Crown of Swords. Maybe I'm just a fucking loser and I like the ones that people don't like as much more than the ones that people do like, or some shit. Nevertheless, I was really worried after A Crown of Swords because people kind of differ on whether that counts as part of the slog. The Path of Daggers is more of like, oh, this is getting into it, and so after not caring about A Crown of Swords, I was kind of like, oh shit, this could be a DNF late in the game, but it won me back. God bless. Next up, I don't have with me. There's going to be quite a few of them I don't have with me because I only had a finite amount of room in my cases to bring books. So, next up was Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. This was recommended by a friend of mine, and we were talking about books when I first met her, and she recommended this book. So I got around to reading it, and it was really good. It's a historical fiction, which is about the final public execution done in, I think, Norway now, if I remember. Yeah, I read it. I read it over a month ago now. That's like seven book years. You know what I mean? And essentially, it's where the murder of two men have happened. There was a burned down barn in which two men have died, and three people, two women and a man, are being sentenced to death as a result. And they're being sent to different places to wait for the result of that. And we're following Agnes, who is sent to a farm to live with a family of peasants, and It's essentially about the relationship dynamics between her and the community that arises there. It's to do with her story and what comes out. Historical fiction in the sense of the death, like the deaths did occur, the trials did occur, etc. But the details are kind of webbed as a result of that. Overall, beautiful writing, really captured the feeling of being there. Like the visceral sense of the cold, the snow, trudging around, the smells, the rot on the walls, all of this stuff of that era of living, and the location really hit hard. So I would recommend waiting until the fall, until winter, hit that up and just fall into a miserably sad story. Then next up are two novellas, kind of short stories, quasi between the two sometimes, that fills out the kind of trilogy I was doing, where now that I've finished uni, there's big authors, big books, classics that I wanted to tackle that I haven't had time to because I've had other reading I needed to do. And as a result, the other books I read were enjoyment based. Those three authors that I've wanted to read big works from but didn't have time to have been Tolstoy, James Joyce, and Dostoevsky. I want to try all three of those, and as a result, I had The Death of Ivan Ilyich, which I read last month, and then in May, and then I had The Dead by James Joyce and White Nights by Dostoevsky. So I read those latter two this in June. Out of the two, I preferred White Nights. I preferred Dostoevsky. Purely, I think that The Dead had a hampering that it comes in a collection, The Dubliners, or just Dubliners, and as a result, there's probably, well, naturally, it's the last short story in that collection, and so I feel like there's an implied build-up and growing sense in that collection that I feel like I would have garnered more from it if I'd have read the entire work, of course. But I had The Dead on hand, so I read it. White Nights, I still gave the Dead 3.75. I know it's meant to be one of the best short stories of all time. I understand that. I did enjoy it, but I think because I read it after Ivan Ilyich, and Ivan Ilyich was just perfect for me, then I think it struggled as a result. But White Nights was an interesting read. Evidently, I fell on the side of the Russians out of the ones I tried. White Nights is about a guy who is walking down the street and hears a woman crying, and he's lonely. He's never had a relationship. He's completely isolated, and he meets this woman who is waiting for her this man to return to marry her. It's been a year, and he promised he'd return after a year, and it's about those two coming together and bonding over their loneliness and isolation. And I won't say any more than that because there's little bits that make it kind of more than that. But that's essentially the premise. Beautiful writing once again. Thoroughly enjoyed that. But gave it 4 stars. Ivan Ilyich won, which meant Tolstoy won. So that means I'll overread Anna Karenina or War and Peace at some point, hopefully before the end of this year, depending on like how big the other books I'm reading are. But because I still got Malazan to finish, I'm rereading Stormlight Archive and also Tackle and Wheel of Time, so maybe that'll be one that once I'm done all these massive series with massive books, I'll be able to actually go through with it. But I would like to get to it. Next up, I have it here. So the next book I read was Swimming in the Dark by Tomasz Jedrowski. I don't know whether that's how you pronounce his name, but that's how I've said it, so I'm sticking with it, saying it with my chest. This is a 5 out of 5 book. This was fucking amazing. I thoroughly loved it. It was chosen for my Patreon book to read, and there's a reason I brought it with me even after finishing reading it, because I want to reread it. It was astounding. Essentially, this begins with a boy called Ludwig in Poland, the kind of, very early 80s. I think, if anything, the turn of the decade. It's 1980, and he essentially is about, the beginning of the book is about him discovering his homosexuality. It's a lot to do with yearning, about shame and beauty and all of this stuff, and it's full of these visceral descriptions of longing and yearning, and I think they always strike with me a lot when an author hits that perfect description of just pure longing and kind of unrequited, but not hostile. You know, like sometimes longing can be like stalking. This isn't that. This is the definition of yearning. This is then the beginning of his relationship with Janos, who is someone who's at a camp with him, and yeah, it kind of transfigures partway through from being this coming of age love story to then being about Poland at the kind of crossroads of Soviet Union rule, where Janos finds himself in the party. He becomes part of the propaganda department, and Ludwig is still someone who hates the party, believes that they are kind of, well, doing what they were doing. They were suppressing the people, hurting the people, removing healthcare, etc. And instead, what the latter half of this book comes about is the kind of the sacrifices you're willing to make, both yourself and then morally. And so we see Janos go through kind of this idea of being persuaded by what the party can give to him, and then as a result what he can give to those around him to make their lives better. And for him, he's willing to make that sacrifice morally to have a better life for him and his own, and as a result it becomes a kind of friction between them. And I just thought that the love story was already great, and then when you add that level of political and moral, like a fissure between them, it just made the book just beautiful and tragic, and I cannot recommend it enough. It was amazing writing. It's written as if Ludwig is writing to Janos, so you are Janos essentially in this. It's kind of it's him talking about his life and how you affected it, etc. And it was just great, awesome. Next up, I read King Lear. Not going to say too much about King Lear. I just read it. You know, it's Shakespeare. I've talked about Shakespeare enough, honestly. Then we come to the big disappointment. This is the hard one. This is the one that's difficult. I'm going to check this is still recording. The difficult one is the arc I received for Sky on Fire by Jenn Lyons. I've been very excited to try Jenn Lyons after there was a Discord. There was a Discord group read along of A Chorus of Dragons that I was not able to take part in, and I have been very jealous because everyone was so positive on that series, and I've been wanting to read Jenn Lyons for a while, but they're monster books. And so when I saw this standalone, romantasy kind of feel, heist, society controlled by dragons, I was like, let me at it. And I gave it 2.25 stars. I've done this spiel a lot now because I've already talked about it and people have been asking me about what I thought about it. And mainly it was the pacing for me. There is so much that happens in this book at a breakneck pace that I was completely never allowed a moment to become invested in the characters. And that's mainly it. The fact that I never became invested in the characters, now it's something that I've been looking at reviews obviously because I want to get an idea of the temperature of the room now that I've read it, to know whether I was in the minority when it comes out or whether people follow my view of it as well. It seems like it's getting massively mixed reviews from what I've seen. But a lot of people do echo the idea that they have no investment in the characters. And that mainly comes down to that this is a 400-page book that easily has the plot for a trilogy within it. It's crazy how much happens. And as a result, the characters are what is sacrificed. Brilliant ideas within this book. Essentially what happens, the plot is that a dragon and their dragon rider, which is the whole thing I'll get into, lands on this like keep where these people kind of having this ceremony, and the dragon rider's like, there was a woman who was killed here for betraying the dragons a long time ago, and we have reason to believe she's alive. You need to go find her. That's the prologue. So, from my expectation, I was like, oh shit, we're gonna have to find this person. Like, this is going to be a big part of the book. Maybe even the whole book is going to be about this idea of finding this person. And then that's the protagonist for the whole book. So, like, we don't find them, they're just there. And we automatically know that straight away. So I was like, oh, okay. So then you kind of get into the idea of, okay, so this is what the book is about. And essentially, the dragons, the way that it works is that there's the kind of ascended rich society that lives kind of up on the mountains, up on this place where it's like super light air, super thin air. They've all accommodated to it. The dragons live up there, they fly around, etc. And then down in the jungles, way down below, people live, and it's thicker air. And as a result, people struggle going back and forth because of the thinness of the air, the concentration of oxygen changes, like, and so people struggle going back and forth, and as a result, the people in the jungle down the bottom are seen as poorer. People on the top ascended, living happily ever after. And so then we find that we're with our protagonist, who the dragon, the people who have been sent to find her. That kind of happens, and I was like, oh, okay, so now we're going to have, this is the plot, and then suddenly we're like, oh no, we're now here, this is now the plot, and the plot changes fucking 45 times throughout the first half of the book. So unless you've read the blurb and understand where you're eventually heading up, otherwise it feels like you're moving at breakneck speed. It's crazy. That was something I just didn't jive with. I love my characters. That's the whole reason I read, is to fall in love with characters. The ideas can be cool as hell, but if I don't feel connected and I don't feel that the ideas have been elaborated enough, that's when I finish disappointed, which is what happened here. Because there are also brilliant ideas in this book, such as the dragon rider dynamic. There's the kind of there's a relationship inside this that is someone with their dragon, and it's like an abusive relationship between the control that this dragon has over a human. It's very Robin Hobb. It's super interesting. I was so down for more of that. And instead, they're not even like a secondary character, they're like a tertiary character. They're completely kicked to the side, and then eventually they come around into the plot. And it was that sense where people would pop up with interesting things, and I'd be like, oh, that's epic. That, I can't wait to hear more about that. I can't wait to explore this. And then we never explore any of it, and it's just tossed in front of us. Most of the conclusion relies on coincidence or like very quickly explained things, because once again, the book is so short that it's doing so much that things just have to happen the way they do. What other cool ideas were there? There's a really interesting relationship dynamic that I'm not going to spoil, but it's not something you don't. It's not often seen in a lot of books, and I thought it was dealt with really well. Interesting character dynamics, even though the characters themselves aren't extrapolated on a lot, and I could have done a lot more with that. As a result, because the book's also trying to do so much, when it fucking throws spice in, it's from out of nowhere. Like, people go from cold to like fucking in 3 seconds, because there's not enough time to build that get that kind of, yeah, to transition from cold to boiling fucking hot. So instead, it's like, there's a scene in this book where people have kind of been like, huh, maybe we like each other, maybe. And then it's like, I'm going to tie you up and like fuck the shit out of you. And it's like, I would have really liked a bit of foreplay here. And like, I don't know. People may read for different things, but the same way as like Swimming in the Dark worked so well, because it was that yearning beforehand. You felt that feeling of like, of utter especially in the kind of weird, like the kind of quasi BDSM feeling in terms of Sky and Fire. You want, if you're going to have that feeling, I feel like there needs to be a bit of like submission into the feelings themselves to understand it. But instead, that doesn't happen. And I understand that it can. The problem is that if it was a one-time thing within the book, that would make sense. Once again, the feelings don't need to be there if someone's just going to fuck. But the problem is, it is the relationship, and so as a result, that's where the issue is. That's in my opinion. And what was the final thing that annoyed me? No, that was it. That was the main things. I don't want to harp on it too much. I'm still going to try Chorus of Dragons because people have said so much about how good it is. So I do desperately want to read it. I also think those books are far larger and a massive series, which means it will have the time to be able to go into things that Swimming, not Sky and Fire just didn't have time for. It's a big shame. I don't think anyone's more disappointed than me. But, you know, then in the continuation of reading new books that come out, I also picked up Private Rites by Julia Armfield. So I read Our Wives Under the Sea. It is here. And thoroughly enjoyed it. I gave that 4.25 stars. And Private Rites, I gave 4.5 stars. I thought it was brilliant. In terms of if you want an individual review that really goes into it, I think Willow over at Willow Talks Books did an amazing job describing it. And essentially, to give my kind of voice to it, this takes place in the slowest apocalypse of all time. There essentially, it's just that it's never stopping raining now. If it stops raining, people are sent home from work because it's such a rare occurrence. So people are allowed to enjoy it. And as a result, over time, the landscape has shifted. The train lines are underwater, river taxis are being used, people are having like swollen joints, all this kind of new illnesses, not illnesses, but the amount that the illnesses are taking place are increasing because of this new dynamic, this new culture that people are having to live in of mass water everywhere. And essentially within that, we're following three women who are the daughters of a big architect, and he was kind of the architect who designed kind of ridiculous houses, big glass structures, etc. All of these things that in a world that's slowly dying is a useless expression of power and just, yeah, a pointless endeavour. But the problem with the world ending is that the world ending is happening too slowly. And that is, I would say, the best thing about this book. I have seen people love and hate this book. Personally, I thoroughly loved it. And I have noticed that the people who loved it were British and the people who didn't love it weren't. And I think, not to say that there's like a separation, but from what I can see in terms of how I feel, that I've watched 14 years of the slow murder of my country through Tory rule. And yeah, the destruction of the NHS, the destruction of teaching, the destruction of infrastructure, all of these things have been purposely dismantled over a decade and a half. And I think as a result, the British, which Armfield is, has a real sense of connection to that idea of watching something slowly die, and it's happening so slowly that you don't do anything about it. People just adjust. Coffee shops still exist in a world underwater. All of these things still exist. People work from home, people adjust, so they still work. Everyone's acting like life is normal. And as a result, that is mirrored with our characters essentially sorting out everything after the death of their father. And the book does not focus on this world building. I'm going into the world building because I think it's thoroughly important to whether you'll enjoy it or not. And essentially, when you tie those two ideas together, you have a personal tragedy. You're looking after your family. You're dealing with your family members that you may not get along with too well. And at the same time, the world is slowly dying. And as a result, it's kind of about the idea of distraction, the idea of why we can't do anything, and how paralyzed we are as a society. I thoroughly loved the execution of the book. It is it exudes like gothic feeling. It just exudes that sense of like drab, dirty, horrible, and kind of like supernatural. There's a feeling that there's an unworldly element to the world that we recognise, and I just think that Julia Armfield, her work with water is second to none. She does an amazing job, and yeah, I loved it. Thoroughly loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars. It essentially mainly come down, the reason I didn't get 5 stars is mainly down to the ending. And the ending works in the sense of thematically it ties everything together. I'm not going to go into why it ties everything together, but I found the ending satisfying in the sense of how unsatisfying it was. So I'll say no more than that. After that, the book's right behind me. I went on to read The Lions of Al-Rassan by Guy Gavriel Kay. I'm reading this with Grace, Bryce, and Murphy for our next book read. We're going to record a video talking about it at the end of July. I've been wanting to read Guy Gavriel Kay for a long time. So many people love him, so many people admire his writing especially. I know that in the talking about Michael Moorcock that Brandon Sanderson and Andrew Abercrombie did, they also mentioned Guy Gavriel Kay as a writer's writer. So as a result, we all decided that we would read The Lions of Al-Rassan, and honestly, thoroughly loved it again. 4.5 stars. It was... The themes, once again, that's what nailed it for me. Essentially, we're reading an alternate reality, medieval Spain, and like there are 3 main religions. They're analogous to Christian, Muslim, and Jewish. And we're following a member of each of those religions and how they're kind of forced together, forced apart, and how they work and function together. Mainly, yeah, the theme of understanding, empathy, connection, human friendship, love, all of these things around the idea of faith, and it creates such a tragic image and a beautiful image. Honestly, I went from enjoying it at the beginning to the end, like tearing up at how beautiful the work was. I do think that that there are sex scenes within this book that I think are kind of gratuitous in the sense of it's very male focused lensed, and it's a very kind of like women are here to be a metaphor for men's pleasure, etc. And it's kind of all about that. But you know, men do be writing sometimes. So clearly I've had an issue with a lot of sex scenes I've been reading recently, apart from Swimming in the Dark. But yes, Lions of Al-Rassan, there is the kind of concept of how people forge relationships and how everyone is the same, and how if we just spend time listening to each other, we can form those connections and find common ground, and the tragedy when that doesn't happen and the beauty when that does happen, etc. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. If you want a book that's got beautiful writing, very easy to pick up world building because it's just medieval Spain and analogous religions, but strikes the theme so well with that beautiful writing. The characters were dynamic, were interesting, were layered, nuanced. I will remember each of the 3 main characters well beyond reading this book. They'll probably be in a list of best characters I've read, because for once again, this is a 600-page book. Sky on Fire being 400, that's the difference. Those 200 pages of being able to take your time and experience full scenes that don't need to end with action, don't need to end with something. You can allow a moment to sit and characters to have a conversation that just exists, just ends. It doesn't exist. Sky on Fire is the definition of everything must happen to advance the plot. The stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. The Lions of Al-Rassan is sometimes things happen that don't advance the plot. If anything, they steal everything. But what is happening in those scenes develops the feelings that you're meant to have, the understanding you're meant to have. So when the payoff occurs, you understand where the characters are at, the feelings they have, and as a result, the connection is there. And I was so thoroughly connected at the ending of this book. So 100% recommend it. And finally, I read In the Shadow of the Fall, which is an arc that just it comes out, I think, in like 2 weeks. It's a novella. It's only about 100 pages long. I think on Goodreads it's 160, but on my NetGalley arc it said like 90. And really enjoyed this one as well. I've read the author's short story, which was in the Book of Witches, which I have here, and really enjoyed that. And as a result, when I found out that he had a book coming out, I kind of held off waiting for it. And I'm really glad I did, because it was a solid 4 stars. Mainly, my only criticism was that it was too short. You know, like in 90 pages, I could have read easily 3 times the size of this book, telling the exact same story, but just sit with those characters, have that kind of the real connection, have some scenes that don't mean anything. I miss scenes like that, and I know it could be a problem with the kind of publishing industry as a whole, but I do truly miss just slow, quiet scenes. And this book does still have them. I thought it did a very good job of having those scenes despite being so short. But I could have spent a long time with all of these characters. And essentially you're following a character called Ashake. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. I apologise in advance if it's not. But from how I was reading it, I just make up names in books. And Ashake was how I was reading it. And she is she's an acolyte in this religious order where you are contacted by the Orisha. The idea is that there are these gods that contact and have a human voice that speaks for them, and they communicate with. And Ashake, it kind of has this moment where she realizes that it's never going to happen for her, and so as a result, we follow her becoming disillusioned with her religion, and then meeting a group that kind of questions everything. And I know what you're thinking. That sounds pretty generic in the sense of, turns out religion's not everything you thought it would be, and now this new group tells you that actually they're it. The good thing that In the Shadow of the Fall does is that at the end of this book, I still have no idea who I'm meant to trust and who I'm meant to believe, who I'm meant to follow. And I think that ambiguity works perfectly. Where there was a point halfway through this novella where I was like, oh, like this is doing that trope well, but am I really gonna rate it highly as a result? But instead, it wraps everything round where I was so invested, so intrigued by the world building. The writing is effortlessly brilliant, and I was kind of like, I'm left with a kind of moral quandary now. I'm left with the question that the main character has. I don't know which of these are the right side. And I think that's wonderful. If anything, neither of the right side. And I think that just, it does it so well, where I was just kind of like, I don't know who is the rightist. And I think that's an exciting place to be going into. It's a duology, the novella. And I think that's an exciting place to be. I'm looking forward to reading it in January when it comes out. And for a debut, thoroughly enjoyed it. Great writing. And look forward to seeing what else. I know that there's a short story collection he also has that I want to get. But for now, I'm happy with what I've read there. I think that's it. That's everything I read. I'm going to hold this up to see whether I decide to do a thumbnail or not. But if I don't, I'll just continue to sit like this and say that thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy, please do like and please do subscribe. Let me know if you've read any of these, if you enjoyed them, if you're looking forward to any of the new releases, because I think there were three new releases in there. And as always, have a nice rest of your day.